So we'll work on kind of focusing on building stability and mobility in the muscles of the hips, the upper leg, and the lower leg. And I had a teacher that said to me once, there are no knee issues, but we all have knee pain eventually, right? But there are hip or ankle issues. So usually it's a stability kind of muscular issue either in the lower limb, so the shin or the ankle or the foot, or the hip, and the muscles of the thigh are hip muscles. So we're going to kind of explore all of these things. But what we're going to start with, and I know we're doing this cold, and we're doing this cold for a purpose, we're going to start with exploring a squat. And that might scare you. Just know that you're going to only go to where you feel comfortable going. You might use your strap for this, and a resistance band would work for this as well. So go ahead and stand up. And for our squat position, if you have your hands down beside your hips with the wrist hanging right below your shoulders, your outer edges of your feet will kind of be right inside your fingertips. And the outer edges of your feet parallel. So oftentimes we do this with feet open. Different way to do it. We're going to do it with feet parallel today. If your shoulders are tight, you may not want to do the upper body thing. You can just have your hands on your hips, or you can bring your arms above your head and kind of pull your belt taut, or your strap. If it's stretchy, that's fine too. So take a deep breath in to your lower ribs. So fill up your lower ribs. And then as you start to exhale slowly, just squat as deep as you can. And you may know that you can't go that deep. Just know that. But you can also go as low as you can. So if you're able to take it into that low squat, deep squat, just notice and then press back up. And just make a mental note of your squat because we're going to come back to it. Now lie down. So your block's kind of off at the front of your mat. Your strap, we're going to go ahead and get the strap ready. We're going to start with a pretty big loop. And if you have a resistance band, you don't have to worry about it. But to measure your loop, take it and wrap it around your right foot. And then the belt loop will be right at the edge of your hip, towards the back of the hip. So with the foot flexed, it's about the length you would maybe want to have it. And if your belt isn't that big, the belt is not necessary. It's just an additional prep. So once you are done with that, just kind of let it off to the side, bend your knees and roll your back onto your back. So I'm going to start with some breathing. So start with your knees bent. Walk your feet mat distance apart or wider than your hips, and allow your knees to knock in towards each other. So we're going to use this setup for a lot of things today. So we've done this before, but in case you weren't here, take your finger and place it on the bottom of your chin, not on the neck side, but on the face side, and start to push the chin towards your throat. Notice how that lengthens the back of your neck. So back of the neck is long, chin is tucked. Take your hands, place your fingertips on the top of your pelvis where the hip points stick out, kind of that hard bony surface that kind of sticks out. So fingertips there, and your thumbs on your lower ribs. So your hip points are going to be even across and even with the back of your hips too. So sometimes we have this tendency to press the lower back into the floor. Resist that. We want to have a natural lower back curve. So we want to form that lordosis. So the lower back is slightly off the floor. And then scrape your fingertips down so that your thumbs down so that your lower ribs tuck in. And you can kind of feel the front of your core engage as you draw the lower ribs down and in. And then rest the heels of the hands on the side of the rib cage. Fingers drawing in towards the midline of your body. Instead of closing your eyes, look straight up at the ceiling. So go through these cues again. Chin tucked, neck long. Front of the pelvis, front of the hips is in line with the back of the pelvis. So lower back curve, lower ribs down and in. Keep looking straight ahead, maybe finding a gaze point on your ceiling. And then start to bring awareness to your inhalations. So as you inhale, feel the side of the rib cage press out into the heels of your hands. And as you exhale, feel the sides of the rib cage pull gently away from your hands. The mouth is closed. If at all possible, try to breathe in and out through your nose all the time. So when we fill up this area of the rib cage, we're creating intra-abdominal pressure, which is that pressure that helps to support the lower back. So an interesting tidbit of information. The most commonly injured site of the low back is in the lumbar spine between L4 and S1. And on the front of your spine in this area, you have no musculature support. There's nothing there that supports the front of your spine, which is oftentimes how it leads to injury. So keep breathing into this area as I talk. When we use this type of breathing, where we feel the rib cage press out into the heels of the hands, the diaphragm drops down. So it engages and drops down into the belly. And this creates the intra-abdominal pressure, the gut pressure that you need that actually supports the lower back. So when we squat, when we do anything, having that awareness of the intra-abdominal pressure helps to maintain the stability of your lumbar spine in that area where it's most prone to weakness. Keep your hands where they are. Walk your feet in, allowing your knees to separate. Heels in line with your sit bones. Bring your elbows in and your fingertips facing up towards the sky. So now take your hands off your ribs. So your elbows are resting beside your ribs now, palms facing in. See if you can create that abdominal pressure. So inhale, ribs press out. Keep that awareness, press your feet into the floor, and as you exhale, slowly lift your hips off the floor. Inhale here, fill up, create that pressure, so ribs flare out, not forward, out. And then as you exhale, slowly release, keeping a slight awareness of that support of your spine. And again. Inhale before you start. So engage the diaphragm, ribs press out. As you lift, slowly exhale. Pause at the top. Inhale, fill up the diaphragm. Ribs expand out. And as you exhale, slowly release the hips to the floor. Do this one more time. Feeling first the abdominal pressure. Moving as you slowly release out through your nose, if at all possible, as you lift. Fill up. Slowly release out through the nose as you lower the hips. Good. Take your belt. Grab the belt loop in your right hand and wrap the belt around your right leg. So you're going to take the belt and place the belt with the belt loop, if you have a belt loop, on the outside of your hip. Bend your left knee and wrap the belt around your left foot, the toe pad of your left foot. So adjust and then straighten that leg down to the ground. Adjust your belt so that your belt or your elastic band is in your hip crease. If you don't have it, it's not a big deal. It just adds a little bit more awareness of where the hip crease is. And then grab your knee, your right knee with your left hand. And if you need to tighten your belt loop should be in the position of where you can add a little bit more resistance. You'll feel this deep in your hip crease. So it's not on the front of your thigh. It's in the crease where the leg and the pelvis meet. And then gently start to pull your knee towards your chest. Check your cues again. So chin towards throat, back of the neck long, front of the chest open, lower ribs in. There's still a slight lower back curve, although you may feel the right side of your lower back a little bit more on the floor. Start to draw the knee in towards the chest. Then grab your knee with your right hand or your shin with your right hand and grab your ankle or your outer shin with your left hand and gently rotate your knee open out to the side. So this is external rotation. See if you can deepen into your hip crease. The more you push on the belt with your left foot, you'll feel more of that hip hinge. So we're going to be working on creating that hip hinge feeling. So lightly taking the knee out as far as you can comfortably, maybe switching the right hand to the inside of the knee to press the knee open a little bit more. Keep pushing the left foot into the belt to deepen the hip crease. You're drawing your right heel towards your left hip. Check your cues. Back of the neck long, chin tucked, lower ribs in, pelvis even. See if you can breathe into the bottom of your rib cage. And slowly let your breath out through your nose as you bring your knee back to center. So you can either wrap your fingers in front of your shin, interlacing your fingers, or if you have the flexibility, you can take your right forearm behind your right thigh and hold your right hand with your left hand, pulling your knee closer. So regardless of where you are, look down at your knee, so chin is tucked, and make sure your knee is more, it's not pointing out to the side, it's not pointing out or towards the midline, so kind of in a straight line with where it is in the hip socket. If you are using your hands, use your hands to stabilize your knee in neutral. Flex your ankle. So draw your toes towards your shin. Really pull your toes towards your shin as much as you can. So another area of concentration is dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So drawing the toes towards the shin is dorsiflexion. And you might start to feel the muscles on the front of your shin, kind of just an awareness of it. That's okay. We don't use these a lot, so it might be hard. And then point your toe, really pushing the foot towards the floor, and you might feel some cramping in your toe. Again, just be aware of that. Flex it again, really pulling the toes towards the shin, and then press the toe towards the ground. Bring it back to neutral. Dorsiflex your foot, so toes towards shin, and start to turn the foot, the bottom of the foot out. So as if you could push it towards the wall to the right of you. Your knee is staying central, so your knee is not moving. It's all, we're using these muscles in the front of our shin that we very rarely use, that add to the strength of dorsiflexion, but also in stabilizing the knee. Bring it back to center, and then do the opposite. So knee stays where it is, turn the bottom of your foot towards your left thigh, or towards the left side of the room. Go back out again. This is taking it into pronation, And then bring it back in, supination. And this may be challenging, using muscles that we don't normally use. And then start to make circles with just your ankles. So taking it through the full ranges. So taking it into flexion, taking it out, facing the right side, up and inside. So do that a couple of times in one direction. Moving really slowly, almost as if you're moving your foot through molasses, and then switch directions. Seeing how far you can take it through that full range of motion. Good. Bend your left knee, release your belt from your hip crease. Grab your right shin, take your left heel towards your right sit bone and let the left knee roll out slightly and start to roll forward and back. Rocking all the way up. So that you land on your right foot forward and shift forward. So now that you're sitting on your left heel. Take your hands on both of your knees and gently press your knee forward. So straight forward as if it's pushing over your second and third toe. So getting a little bit of a stretch, more of now we have that, we're using gravity to help create that same kind of dorsiflexion. Take it back. Turn your knee slightly in, take your hand to the outside of your knee and push it over your big toe. So a little bit of an internal rotation. Take it back. Bring your hand to the inside, left hand to the inside of your right knee. Push it over your pinky toe, but push your knee into your hand. Good. Bring both hands to the ground. Come up onto your left knee. And then stand up. So feet are parallel and about hip distance apart. Just start to rock forward and back and notice where the weight is on your feet. So feeling the weight shift to the ball mounts of your toes and then into your heels. And then rock a little side to side. And notice the difference between the right and left. We've done some work on the right, not so much on the left. And bring your hands to your hips and just look down at your feet. Spread your toes. This is harder than it sounds. Keep your toes on the ground, but lift your big toes off the ground. Try to keep the ball mount of your big toe on the ground, but lift the big toe off the ground. Notice if your other toes like pinch. Notice if one foot does it more. And imagine you could kind of drag the heel, your inner heel, and your big toe mount together. So we're using the muscles of the feet, other muscles we don't normally use. Bring the big toes down. Keep the big toes down and lift your toes, the other 4 toes off the ground, keeping the ball mounts of your pinky toes on the ground. And then spread your toes to bring all of your toes down. Bend your knees. Send your hips back. So we're hip hinging. So hips go back. We're practicing that hip hinge. Lower all the way down. Take your belt, or actually keep your belt close by and roll back onto your back. Elbows beside your ribs, palms face in, fingers point up. Heels sit bone distance apart. See if you can find the awareness of your 4 points of your feet that you just found on the floor. Press those down into the floor. Tuck your chin, lengthen your neck, spread your collarbones. Lower back slightly off the floor, lower ribs down and in. Expand your rib cage. As you exhale, press your feet down to lift your hips. Allow your glutes to engage. Press a little higher. Inhale, expand your ribs. So diaphragm's working, core support, and slowly lower your hips. Notice what happened to your chin. Did it come untucked? Keep chin tucked, neck long. Keep that awareness, press down in your feet. Inhale, expand your ribs out to the side, not forward. As you exhale, press down, squeeze, lift your hips. So allow your glutes to engage and lift higher. Inhale, expand the ribs out. Find that gut pressure and then lower down. Take the belt again, take it in the belt loop in your left hand. Wrap, step inside of the belt with the left leg. So it's in your hip crease. Take the other end of the belt and wrap it around your right foot and stretch the leg long to the ground. Tighten up your belt so that it's in your hip crease as you can, so you feel that kind of tension, making sure it's in the crease, not on the thigh. So take it deep into the crease and then pull it deep. Bend the knee, grabbing either in front of the shin or grab in front of the shin. You may use some tension on the foot, the right foot, to pull the belt deep so you can feel that hip hinge as you draw your knee closer to your chest.
Dixie, your screen's dark and I can't hear you. I can see you now.
Okay, something happened. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Did you mute yourself? Yes. Okay. So we have the belt in the hip crease, the other one on the foot. Knees back to center. You'd either grab your knee on either side with your hands, or if you have the flexibility, wrap your forearm behind your thigh and grab your left hand with your right hand. Look down at your knee, make sure your ankle is in line with your knee and your knee is in line with your hip. Check your cues, tuck your chin, lengthen your neck, lower ribs down and in, flex your ankle strongly. So start to pull the toes towards your shin to the point where you feel something happening. So you may feel a little bit of tiredness, like you're really working the muscles on the front of your shin. They're muscles we don't use often. And they're muscles that are related to our knees. So creating awareness of these muscles, creating strength in these muscles helps our knees. And then do the opposite. Point the foot, pushing the toes towards the ground. If you get a little cramp in the bottom of your foot, just be aware of that. That might be something going on in your feet. Notice if the foot starts to turn in, and keep your ankle in line with your knee. Check your cues. Chin tucked, neck long. Come back to center. Pull the foot up again. So dorsiflexion. Noticing if you pull more with your big toe, and try to pull as much with the outer, the pinky toe. Point again. Push the foot down. Come back to center and start to keep the knee where it is and start to turn the foot out. So the sole of the bottom of the foot is facing the left side. Notice your tendency to turn the knee in and resist it out. So you're just moving from your ankle and the bones within your leg. The knee itself is not moving. So it's staying in neutral. And then take the bottom of the foot in. Take it out again. Notice where you feel the engagement on the outside of the shin. Notice if the knee starts to work its way in, push it out. Bottom of the foot in. And then going through rotations in one direction, trying to find that full range of motion in your ankle joint. Feeling the muscles of the front of the shin, the back of the calf working, almost as if you're moving through molasses, the knee doesn't move. And then the opposite direction. Good. Bend the right knee, release the belt from the groin. Tuck your right heel towards your left sit bone and continue to hold your right shin. You can also hold behind your thigh and gently start to rock forward and back. And then getting the momentum to rock all the way up. You can keep your right heel on the ground or you can tuck it under. Give a little stretch of the front of the calf, the shin. Take your hands on your knee, press your knee forward. You're feeling more of a loaded dorsiflexion, shift back. Turn the knee towards the midline, hand comes to the inside of the knee. So it's going over your big toe. Come back, take the hand to the outside of your knee. It's going towards the pinky edge of your foot. You're resisting your knee in with your hand and pushing the knee out into your hands. Come back, both hands come to the floor. Take the right foot back and then step it up beside the left foot, feet hip distance apart, press down and lift up. Take your belt and place it on the floor off the mat. So just a straight belt. And then take your block and place it on top of your belt. So the ball mounts of your big toe are up against the block and they're on the belt. Start to press the edges of the ball mounts of your big toe into the block and pull your outer hips back. Keep your toes on the ground and lift your big toe off the ground. The ball mounts of the toes are still on the belt and start to pull the belt apart with your big toes lifted and the ball mounts of your big toes pressing down and all your other toes pressing down. And just notice what happens. Like on my left foot, my toes curl. And I have a hard time lifting that big toe. Notice where you feel it up in your legs and bring the big toe down. Now press the ball mounts, the edges of your big toes into the floor. Press your big toes down, lift your other toes. And as you try to spread your toes, push the edges of your feet into the block. And notice what you feel. Notice your knees start to try to turn in. Try to keep them out. Really spread your toes. Notice if one set of toes tries to curl more, then release and move that out of the way. Come back into feet parallel, feet hip distance apart. Bend your knees, send your hips back. Bring your hands to the floor. Come up onto your toes, send your knees forward and send your hips back. So we're in a deep hip flex and then come down onto your knees. Tuck your toes under. I'm going to stretch the soles of our feet. Tabletop. So shoulders above your wrist, knees below your hips, toes tucked. Start to press the ball mounts of your toes back as you send your hips towards your heels. So send your hips as close to your heels as you can. Press down through your hands and round your spine. Inhale, lift your head. Come onto your knees, take a breath in, fill the bottom of your diaphragm, toes stay tucked under, and lift up onto your hips. Squeeze your glutes and move your hips slightly forward. Inhale into your ribs, so create that pressure. Sit back on your heels. Lower your hands to the floor, press the hands down, round your spine. Lift your head. Inhale, fill up your diaphragm, lift up onto your knees, press your hips forward, lift your chest. Inhale, fill into the diaphragm. Exhale, sit back on your heels. Try to keep your shoulders above your wrist. You're going to feel a stretch in the bottom of your feet. Slowly lower your hands to the floor. Press back. This time, keep your head lifted and lift your knees off the floor. Lower your knees to the floor. Inhale, fill up in the diaphragm, lift up onto your knees. Squeeze your glutes. Bring your hands to your hips. Glutes are engaged. Shift all the way back. We have to use the glutes moving forward, core. Inhale, fill up. Exhale, shift up. Bring your hands to the floor as you sit your hips back. Round your spine, push back. Lift your head, lift your knees off the floor. So we're kind of in a toe squat here, but our hands are on the floor. Lower your knees to the floor. Inhale, fill up the diaphragm. Shift up onto your hips. Hands on your hips, squeeze your glutes, lean back. Shift forward. Inhale, fill up. Exhale, lower down. Hands to the floor. Lean back, lift your knees. Can you tap your right knee to the ground, keeping your left knee off the ground? Lift your right knee. Keep your right thigh touching your belly. Tap your left knee to the ground. Lift up. Tap again, right knee. Lift up. Tap again, left knee. Lift up. Both knees to the floor. Inhale, fill your diaphragm. Lift up onto your knees. Inhale, fill your diaphragm. This time, maybe hands come forward. Lean back. So a little bit more loaded. Lean forward. Exhale, lower down. Hands to the floor. Press down, lift your knees. Tap your right knee to the ground. Lift it up. Tap your left knee to the ground. Lift it up. Tap right knee. Lift. Tap left knee. Lift. Lower both knees to the ground. Inhale, fill your diaphragm. Exhale, up to your knees. Inhale, bring the arms out in front of you. Fill your diaphragm. Or maybe arms up. It's harder. Lean back. Inhale, shift forward. Fill up. Exhale, lower down. Hands to the floor. Untuck the toes. Sit back on your heels. And enjoy the blood, that feel of the blood coming back into the feet. Nice stretch of the muscles of the feet. That sense of dorsiflexion, which is our harder of the flexion of the knees, and can add to hip flexion and knee flexion. Slowly walk your hands forward, bring your forehead to the floor. Let's take a couple of breaths here, allowing that sense of ribs being in because they're on the thighs. Feeling that sense of the diaphragm naturally filling on the side and the back rib cage. Walk the hands forward towards the front of the mat. As you inhale, shift up to hands and knees. Tuck the toes under. Hover the knees and hinge from the hips. Inhale, fill up your diaphragm. Start to press your hips towards your heels, resting your belly on your thighs, and you're in that deep hip flexion. And then slowly start to straighten your knees to find a deeper downward facing dog with that hip hinge. So to find it again, lift up onto your toes. Bend your knees, pressing your belly to rest on the tops of your thighs. So find that deep hip hinge. Pull the lower ribs off your knees, thighs. Draw the chin in, lengthen the back of the neck, and then keep the deep hip hinge as you straighten your knees and lower your heels towards the floor. Step your feet so they're slightly wider than hip distance apart, just slightly. Lift up onto your toes. Bend your knees, finding that deep hip hinge as you walk your hands towards your feet, slowly bringing your heels to the ground. In a deep hip hinge. Notice where your knees are. Bring your hands into your hip creases, staying in the hip hinge. Start to lift your chest as you come all the way up to standing. Bring your hands to your hips. You may at some point have to bring them forward for balance. So another thing with ankle mobility is stability. We don't want to lose that stability of our ankle. So shift your weight into your right foot and bend your left knee forward. Your toe can touch, but if you can balance on one foot, balance on one foot. Remember the cues. Chin in, neck long, lower ribs in, hips even. So notice if you shift the left hip up, try to bring it even with your right hip point. You can keep your hands on your hip as a guide. You're gonna step forward with your left foot and the back heel will come off the ground, but it's in dorsiflexion. Push off with your left foot to come back either to toe tap or balance. We're going to take our foot to the left. So check your cues. Inhale, fill up. As you exhale, side step to the left. This foot goes into that pronation. Push down through your left foot. Come back up, either to toe tap or to balance. Hands can be on the hips or in front. Just make sure hips are even. Slight bend of your right knee, step back, lunge. So we're in dorsiflexion. Push off through the left foot, come back, knee forward. We're gonna go to the other side. So your left foot's gonna come behind and do a little plie, like you're bowing for the queen. Push off through the left foot, come up. So we're gonna do this a few times through rotation. So just go forward, push off, come back. Go to the side, push off, come back. Go back, push off, come back. And plie. Do it one more time on your own. Noticing your foot, both feet. Notice your balance, your stability. And then come back and balance. See if you can find your big toe mount, your pinky toe mount cues. Chin tucked, neck long, ribs in, hips balanced. Inhale fully. Exhale, lower your left leg. Shift to the other. Lift right knee forward. Check your cues. Now start taking it forward, only bringing the back heel off the floor when you need to. Weight to the right foot, push, come back to balance. Find your balance, find your cues. Inhale, exhale, side step. Push down, come back up. Slight bend of your left knee. Step right foot back, and kind of a lunge. Find the weight on the front foot, push down, lift up. Check your cues. Queen's bow. Push down, press up. Find your balance. Going through that a little faster. Decide where your hands go, step forward and back. Side and up. Lunge and up. Plie. One more time. Maybe you'll notice a difference in your foot. Maybe you can think to, have you had injuries in your lower leg? And what side did they show up on? When you come back, balance. Find the 4 points of the left foot. Lift the right knee without lifting the hip. Check your cues. Inhale, release down. Feet slightly wider than hips. Start to bend the knees. So knees go forward, hips hinge back. Bring the hands to the floor. Lift the heels off the floor, toe squat. And come down onto your knees. So you'll need a blanket or something slippery on the surface of the floor. A paper plate works, a slider works. If you don't have that, you can try with your block. That sometimes works too. The left knee remains on the floor, right knee is forward. You're in a 90-90 position. So both knees are bent to 90 degrees. You're not moving your back hip forward. It's directly over your knee. Start to press the left knee down and push it slightly forward. You'll feel your booty engage. So squeeze the booty. Really engage the booty. Bring your right thumb into your hip crease and pull that hip down. So you want to stabilize it. Like when we had the belt in there, the thumb is doing the same thing. It's pulling it down, stabilizing it. Bring your left hand across and hold your knee. Keep your knee still and turn your foot in and turn it out. Turn it in. So the only thing that's moving is everything below your knee. So notice if your knee starts to fake in or fake out, and press it in the opposite direction. So you can use your fingers as kind of a press point. Good. Release the blanket out from underneath of you and step your foot slightly forward. So now you're going more into that hip extension. Right thumb stays in the hip crease. Left hand comes to the knee. Look down at your foot. You may lift your toes and spread. Find a big toe, press the big toe down. Pinky toe, press the pinky toe down. Then use your hand to guide your knee straight forward. As you push your knee straight forward, push down on your thumb and your hip crease. Come back up. Do this 2 more times. So pull the hip crease down as you push the knee straight forward. Notice where the weight shifts on your foot and try to keep it on both the ball mount of the big toe and the pinky toe without curling your toes. And you can let your knee go in front of your ankle like that. I don't know where that came from. It's actually really healthy for our knee to go in that deep range as we get that deeper hip hinge. And when we go into a deep squat, that's what we're doing. So keep your foot where it is, lift back up. Turn your knee slightly in and bring your hand, left hand to the outside of your right knee. Right thumb is still pulling in the hip crease. As you bend your knee towards the big toe, push the knee into the hand as you resist the hand in. So we're exploring range of motion and range of motions that we've been told we're not supposed to. My question is why? Do it a couple of more times. So as you bend the knee in, push the outside of your knee into your fingertips. Come back up. This time, release your hip crease, so you'll have to be aware of it. Take your right hand, place it on the inside of your knee. We're gonna aim the knee towards the pinky edge of your foot as you resist the inside of your knee in and your hand out. So just notice what this feels like. Thinking of your cues, chin tucked, neck long. We're breathing into the diaphragm. We're trying to keep the pelvis as balanced as we can. Release, sit back. And as you sit back on your heels, just notice what you feel. Have you created any more space? Does one hip feel a lot different than the other? And question, why do you not normally do those ranges of motion? Come forward again. So we'll do the other side. So keeping your right knee on the ground. Bring your left foot to the floor, to the blanket, or a block or something you can twist. Left thumb in your hip crease, pull it down. Check your cues. Chin tucked, neck long, ribs wide, or collarbones wide. Lower ribs in. Press down through your right knee. Push the knee forward as you squeeze your booty. So you might take a hand to it and see, am I really squeezing that gluteus maximus? At the same time, you're pulling down on your hip crease. Take your hand to your knee, so your knee stays stable, and start to turn your foot in and out. If you get the knee stable, you may find that where you really need it is the thumb in the hip crease so that the hip doesn't lift. Notice what's going on with your toes. For some reason, I'm gripping with my toes on this foot. Feel how far you can turn it in and out without moving the knee. You might glance down at the knee and release. Move the blanket off to the side and step the left foot forward slightly. So now you're going into hip extension. And we do want to allow the knee to go forward of the toes. When we walk, our knees go forward of our toes. It's important to train in that range of motion. So left thumb in the hip crease, pull the hip crease down. Right hand to the knee, 4 points of the foot press into the floor and just start to go straight forward and back. So aiming the knee between the second and third toe, letting yourself hinge as deep as you can forward as you use your thumb to create that depth in the hip crease. Notice where the weight in your foot goes. Try to keep it balanced. That's going to increase the stabilization of the lower leg muscles. And the next time you come forward, stay there. Take the knee in, so let it dip in. Take your right hand across to the outside of your knee. Keep pulling the hip crease down so that the pelvis stays in neutral. And point the knee towards the big toe as you hinge forward. You know, you're always using your own body as a guide, so you never want to go past what your body is capable of doing today. So kind of listening to those messages and just noticing what's different in each side. Come forward and take your left hand to the outside of your knee. Let your knee turn out, keeping your feet on the floor. And then towards the pinky edge, you're pressing in with your hand and resisting out with your knee. You're going into that deep hip hinge, trying to keep awareness on your cues, your breath, in and out through your nose. And release. Bring the knees together and send your hips towards your heels. Just noticing. Did anything change? Noticing the knees, noticing the space in the front of your ankles, noticing where your pelvis is. And then shift forward, tuck your toes under, sit back, get a little stretch to the heels again. Lift the knees. Walk the hands back as you bring your heels towards the floor. They probably won't touch on the floor. And then move towards straightening the legs as you hinge forward into a forward fold. Step your feet about hip distance apart. Fingertips to the floor. As you lift halfway up, draw your chin in towards your chest, expand your rib cage. Firm the front of your thighs, press your thigh bones back. Let your hips actually tilt back. So you're now bringing your center of gravity over your feet. Oftentimes we say to keep the hips over the heels, but let them go back. See if you can push the leg bones back a little bit more. You may notice I do some shaking in my legs because I've been working them so hard. And then bend the knees. Keep the hip hinge, fingertips into the hip creases, pull the hip creases back, stretch the crown of the head forward, and stand all the way up. Okay. I got one more thing for you before we try our squat again. So we're going to go back to the belt. If you don't have the, you can use a resistance band. You might have to wrap it twice. We're going to take the belt and bring it around our lower thighs, so right above the knees. Your feet, your knees are going to be about hip distance apart. And you're going to take your block and place it between your ankle bones. And make sure the belt is tight enough. So this has your feet parallel. Press into all the ball mounts of your toes and lift all of your toes. As you push the big toes down, push the knees out. Spread all the other toes. And as you bring the toes down, press into the block. Bring your hands to your hip creases. Send the hip creases back as you squat. So press your ankles into the block as you press your knees out. Press down, lift up. And again, press the knees out, squeeze the ankles in, hip hinge, squat. Press down, lift up. Let's add the breath in our cues. Chin in, ribs wide, ribs in, fill up. Exhale, squat. Knees out, ankles in. Inhale. Press down, lift up. Good. Keep this. Lift up onto your toes. Knees will bend. So you have to squeeze the block and press the knees out slightly. Start to hip hinge. Hips go back. Come into a toe squat if you can. My belt is loosening up. Squeeze, inhale, stay on your toes, and come back up. Release it all. All right. Let's try a squat again. So feet are shoulder width apart. So they're wider than the hips. Outer edges of your feet parallel. If you want to use the belt, you can bring that above your head. So imagine the block between your ankles. So the weight's on the big toe. Imagine the belt outside of your knees. Start to send the hips back. So the knees track the toes. And that relationship between the block and the knees with the belt. Inhale. Press down. And slowly lift back up. Good. Let it go. Shake it out. How did that feel? Any difference after all that work? You can do thumbs up, thumbs down. You can also talk about it later. Come down to a seated position. Let's stretch it out. So bring your left shin in front of you, right shin behind you. So 90-90 position if that's comfortable. If not, you can bring these two to match. So it's like this. Walk your hands to the left and fold forward. So you can bring elbows to the floor. You can keep hands on the floor, or you can lower all the way down, resting your forehead on your hands. Bringing your awareness back into the breath. In and out through your nose. Slowing down your breath. Not necessarily trying to make it bigger. And trying to keep it low in the rib cage. And slow and even. And use your hands to press yourself back up. Switch your legs to the other place. Decide if you want both knees at 90 degrees or if you want to rest that left knee inside the arch of your foot. Walk your hands out to the right. Walk your hands forward, maybe bringing elbows to the floor. Maybe stacking your hands and resting your forehead on your hands. Consciously expanding the rib cage out to the sides. With the belly resting on the thighs, you might feel that expansion on the back side of your rib cage as well. And using your hands, press yourself up. Take the legs straight out in front of you. And as if you're walking your sit bones back, as you walk your sit bones back, send your head towards your feet. And not forcing a fold, just allowing where your hip hinge has settled to fold forward. Allowing the spine to round rather than trying to keep it in that axial extension. So just letting the spine go. You might have some tonicity in your legs, or you might just allow your legs to flop open. Either option is fine. And walk your hands beside your hips and roll yourself up. And kind of windshield wipe your knees side to side. You can come onto your back for 5 full breaths just to kind of allow yourself the space to be flat. Noticing how your hips feel. We did a lot of work that could have kind of adjusted something in your lower back and in your hips to where you feel a little bit more even weight side to side. Notice how your legs feel. We work them really hard. So just notice that, be aware. Notice the ease of which you can breathe low and slow and light. So not forcing a big breath, but allowing it to be natural and calm. And whenever you're ready, bend your knees, roll onto your side body, and slowly press yourself up. As you come into that easy sitting pose, just notice what you feel.